And want to welcome from the Daily Signal at Heritage Foundation, Genevieve Wood, senior contributor, joining us on the program this afternoon. Genevieve, thanks for your time.
Hey, good to be with you.
It's good talking with you. I really enjoyed your piece, How New York's New Gun Control Law is Working Out. Hint, not great. Talking about the New York SAFE Act. And thank you for covering this. It's always good to see media that's not specifically devoted to gun issues cover these things in a thoughtful and in-depth way. A lot of times, the general reporters might give you a paragraph or two, but you really do explore how the SAFE Act is not working in New York State.
That's right. Well, and it's not working in a couple of ways, as I note in my article. Number one, it was passed supposedly to make New York a safer place. And as many of your listeners may know, this was passed, hurried through the state legislature in New York. Within 24 hours, Governor Cuomo pushed it through, didn't have time for debate, no time for the public to take a look at what was in it, or frankly, even the lawmakers that were actually voting on it because they pushed it through so quickly. And this happened right after the Newtown shootings in Connecticut. And, of course, it was a way of lawmakers and politicians trying to look like they're doing something because that's what many of them, they want to be able to say, oh, we saw this horrific tragedy. We want to make sure this never happens in New York. But the reality is what they pushed through, and there's no evidence it's making New York any safer. And what it did is for many folks who live in New York State who own guns, certain types of guns, it made those guns illegal and basically said if you already own this kind of, first of all, you can't buy them anymore. If you do have them, you've got to come and register them. You're going to have to change the way that they are utilized. They have a certain number of ammo clips. You've got to get rid of that. So basically it took law-abiding citizens and said, we're going to basically punish you, does nothing to deal with the very things that caused what we saw in Newtown. So number one, it's not working. Counties across the state of New York are saying we're not going to enforce it. You've got the state police saying, we're not even going to tell you how many people have come and registered these guns, but we have good reason to believe those numbers are very low, which is one reason they're not reporting it. The courts there have questioned whether it was even constitutional what they did. So there's that side of it. And then on top of it, Remington Arms, which is a gun manufacturer based in upstate New York, has since, because one of the firearms that was affected in this was called the Bushmaster rifle, which is produced in upstate New York. Remington Arms said we're going to stop producing that gun there. We're moving that production and over 100 different jobs down to our new plant in Alabama. So, Governor Cuomo claims that decision had nothing to do with Remington Arms' decision to lay off folks up in upstate New York, but there seems to be every reason to believe that's exactly one of the reasons they did what they did.
Yeah, and you point out the trouble that this law has had, both in terms of enforcement efforts, to courts overturning some aspects of this law. Really, what is left at this point, Genevieve, is the gun ban. The magazine ban that was originally going to be 7 rounds. Governor Cuomo said, well, okay, 7 rounds. We don't really have 7-round magazines. So you can have 10-round magazine, but you got to stop at 7 bullets in it. That's been thrown out. The ammunition registration and background checks for ammunition purchases, the state police, they say they don't know how to implement this. They don't know when they'll be able to implement this. So what we have is that gun ban.
That's right.
So,
what's interesting is that, and as I point out in my article, what's interesting is that you saw, and you can tell when people feel as though their rights are being infringed upon, because literally the local chapter of the NRA in New York, their membership doubled over the course of the year. From the time the law was passed, over the course of this past year, it literally went from 22,000 members in New York to 41,000. So New York now has the largest state NRA chapter in the country. Everybody thinks it's, a place like Texas. No, it's actually because most people in Texas don't feel threatened by their state legislature and governor when it comes to guns. In New York, they clearly do, and that's why they joined the NRA.
Yeah, and not only in New York State, but some of these other states that saw the passage of gun control laws we're seeing that there really has not been a political benefit for these politicians. There's been no public safety benefit for the residents, but there's been no political benefit either. You know, the Manhattan media, Genevieve, made a great deal of saying, well, look, if you stand up to the extreme gun lobby and you support these bills, that constituents will love you for this. We haven't seen it. You know, Governor Cuomo's got problems of his own, unrelated to the New York Safe Act, but it's not like you've seen, you know, New Yorkers hold parades for Governor Cuomo. Thanks for keeping us safe. Governor Hickenlooper in
No.
Colorado's facing trouble in his reelection bid. Governor Malloy in Connecticut's facing trouble in his reelection bid. This has not been popular when it's been
No,
implemented
well,
around the
and
country.
you mentioned that the governor out in Colorado, they had state legislators out there lost seats in the last election cycle that they held, and many people believe it was because of what they did on their votes dealing with trying to ban firearms. So this is not a popular thing with most Americans. Look, most Americans don't think it's the good folks with guns that we have to worry about. It's the bad guys. But every time a state legislature has been taking this up, what they end up doing is going after the law-abiding citizen. I mean, they have, you know, and again, as in the Newtown shooting, there clearly were mental illness issues involved. This law had nothing to do with any of that. So, I mean, again, it's one of those things where lawmakers trying to look like they're doing something when, in fact, that's all they were doing was doing something, as opposed to really taking the time to try to get it right, as opposed to just saying, hey, we passed a law, vote for us because we're trying to make, you know, New York safe. There's no evidence it made it one bit of difference at all.
Exactly. You know, I made this point a little bit earlier when we were talking about the Colorado laws, or I'm sorry, the proposed gun control initiative in Washington State. That, you know, there's a finite amount of law enforcement resources, whether it's the number of prosecutors that you can pay, the number of cases that a prosecutor can handle, number of judges that we have, number of prison beds that we have available. All of these things are finite, and it's a matter of priorities. You know, do you want to cast that net as widely as possible to try to ensnare as many people as possible, knowing that you're going to get people whose only crime is breaking the law that you just established?
Right.
Or do you want to focus your
purchased it.
resources
That's
on the
right.
violent criminals?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, exactly. I mean,
to me, this seems really simple.
yeah, these are folks who, yeah, again, in New York had bought guns, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before this law existed, that were completely legal. Now New York passes a law saying, okay, now we're banning those laws. We know that you're good law-abiding citizens, and so what we're now going to do is take up police time and effort and court time and effort, having you now have to come and register. How is that making the streets any safer? I mean, the reality is that's not what you want your police force spending time doing. And again, do we really think that criminals who own guns are going to come register them? No, of course not. It's only people who are using them for the right reasons in the first place. But again, a misguided law and an attempt. But see, it's easier to pass that kind of law. They knew they could rush it through before people had time to really, it's like the health care law. Before you really know what's in it, we got to pass it. After it's in law, then we'll try to find out what's in it. That's exactly what happened in New York State. And you see several legislators now, because, you know, a lot of Republicans voted for this too. A lot of them now coming out because they've come under fire, to use an expression, from their constituents who are upset about it, saying, well, we did rush that through. We need to reevaluate. We need to maybe make amendments to that. We need to change the law. And, of course, the lobby there is really pushing. The Democrats are really pushing back. Governor Cuomo is pushing back. But I think many lawmakers realize they made a mistake, but now they're in a tough position of trying to fix it.
Yeah, politicians, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. That was the wrong vote to cast. These are not things that you typically hear from elected officials, Genevieve.
No, it's not. It's not. But that means that they're hearing from their constituents, and they're worried about it. So that's a good thing. I mean, and that's what I would just say to folks in New York State, but others as well, is that, you know, they do listen when the heat is on them. They listen. And, you know, Governor Cuomo is not going to change his mind, but he wouldn't have been able to do this had the state legislature not passed it. So there's a lot of folks there who are at fault as well, and they need to be held accountable.
Listen, Genevieve, I appreciate you coming on the program this afternoon. It's great talking with you, and thanks again for covering this.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Genevieve Wood joined as senior contributor at the Daily Signal, put out by the Heritage Foundation.